The Long Way Home, Chapter 42. Honor and Recognition. All Jason had to do was stand there behind Vincent, behind his captain. All he had to do was stand there. Vincent was the one who had to get the words right, and to not goof up the gestures. All he had to do was stand there and hold back his tears. That second wasn't strictly necessary, but he wasn't going to be broadcast all across the net blubbering like a little baby for all the nations to see. So he kept his stiff upper lip and stood in front of the remains of the Long Way with his little crew. Various journalists from various nations spoke various languages in the massive shuttle bay. The Among the Startides We Sing throbbed beneath his feet. The Long Way was silent. The gaping shuttle bay door stood open, and the glowing blue light of a force field was the only thing keeping breathable atmosphere inside the hull, but had to stand open despite the ravages of hyperspace just outside their reality bubble. Tradition was a strong force. Besides, if anything went so wrong that the field went down, the bay would likely be destroyed anyway. And besides again, Jason liked the sight of the swirling rainbow colors. Family law held that all of the George men did. Jason hadn't found anybody who carried the name who didn't. It was a receiving bay, Jason knew, for taking on passengers at worlds that didn't have their own stations, or those with their own small craft who wanted to travel with those craft. It was empty of such craft except for the remains of the Long Way. She lay there, slain, but no less victorious. They'd taken their things out, those things they wanted to keep anyway. Jason wasn't sorry to see the scavenged clothes go directly into one of the recyclers, and Vincent told him that the RNI boarding shotgun was his, so he checked it into the armory. His one gun took significantly less time than the rest of Vincent's armory, but that was a superfluous thought. Another detail to distract himself from the fact that his grief for the Long Way was still a matter for tears. Later, there would be time for tears. He certainly didn't want those tears to be recorded and broadcast and made mock by the use of memes and reaction images online, so he thought about what the others had taken. Vincent all but cleared out his cabin and most of the storage. They were his things, after all, since the Long Way had been his home for years. Cadet hadn't taken much. He just asked Andre to take the co-pilot's yoke out for him. It was a bulky memento for his first home ship, but Jason could see why he in particular wanted it. Andre took less, just a couple of spare bolts, one for herself and one for Jason, who took it gratefully. Mai wanted to save the kitchen knives, despite the injury she took from one, and Vincent told her to keep them. Isis Magdalene took more, the sewing machine Andre had made for her, and the clothes she had made for herself, as well as the clothes she had finally finished for everybody else. All Jason had to do was stand there. The Long Way lay silent at his back. Jason wore the dress white she had made him. They were cut well and fit correctly, and they were different enough so that nobody with brains would know that he wasn't claiming to be a Republic Navy voidsman. But she had insisted on making another set of blue rank insignia to stitch onto the shoulders, and had even gotten the striping on the cups right. He had mixed feelings on the chief's rank, and it was all such a tangle that he couldn't rightly say exactly what feelings were mixed, except that there were things he liked and disliked about it. Cadet wore the former pilot's uniform, made in the Corvian way, but they'd chosen the red and black of the interstellar British Commonwealth to reflect Vincent's homeworld of New Montreal. Cadet fiercely claimed the world as his own, since it's the world his adoptive father's from. Or was it his adoptive father? Both, Jason figured, since they'd more or less adopted each other. Vincent had first wanted to wear his nice clothes as he saw them, but none had passed muster. Now he wore the bright blue three-piece suit that used to be a set of sheets, and Jason was certain that the color had been chosen by Isis Magdalene to be pretty. The girls, of course, wore their dresses again. Trondre stood in her pale pink dress, her feet sturdily planted, and her arms held behind her back with rigid propriety, except one, which subtly dangled to Vi's shoulder. She fought tears, too. To her left, Isis Magdalene achieved something close to a regal poise in her pale blue, and she, too, had a hand subtly reaching down to Vi. And she had no need for subtle knee-bending like the taller girl. Between them, Vi had her face set with determination. She stood in her pale yellow dress, supported by her friends and a pair of matte anodized yellow aluminium braces that she clutched in her hands. The wheelchair was subtly hidden behind the skirts. Jason thought that they made a merry parade of peacocks, or would have done if the occasion wasn't so somber. All Jason had to do was stand there. The Among the Startides We Sing thrummed beneath his feet. A mezzanine, as sometimes cafe, sometimes viewing balcony, was packed with crew and passengers. The crew had a sense to dress formally. Civilians in the best they had, while the passengers lay between that and tourists dressed to watch a spectacle unfolding before them. Some of the passengers were even so ignorant to complain loudly in commercial English so almost everybody, Terran or Starsetter anyway, could understand about the cafe being closed for occasion. Jason tried not to hold it against them. Even the littles of the crew family didn't complain and were properly reverent, except for the babies, or toddlers of course, but nobody expected them to know any better. Tourists should be able to catch on to a mood. Nobody called down the passengers, of course, as that would violate the guest right. But Jason's heirs caught polite explanations that the ceremony would begin shortly, and that the ship would resume normal operations upon its conclusion. One shrill woman's demands were so rude as to come to the very edge of losing her guest right completely. But the Among the Startides Who Sing was a forgiving vessel amongst her other qualities. It all balanced together into a quiet murmur of quiet conversation, mostly. That quiet murmur fell away into silence, and even the rudest of passengers finally realized that they were standing witness to a serious occasion when the wide door at the far end of the bay slid open. All Jason had to do was stand there. The long way lay silent at his back. In that quiet hush, the only sounds were the sounds of a welcoming party walking across the deck with brisk, purposeful steps, nearly a march. It would have been, except that there were members of the family too young to have served in the party, dressed in their Sunday best, and Starsetters so tall as to spoil the marching draped in formal robes festooned with glittering stones and dangling tassels. Those robes were favored by their women, and the men suffered for their favor, unless, of course, they were veterans and could wear a dress uniform instead. It was led by a grey-haired pair, both crewmen and hardened by battles and loss over the years, but neither of them were any less ready to embrace the joy for that hardness. Across the nations, they were known as the Hammer and the Anvil, but Jason knew them as Nana and Pap-Pap, and those were the names they went by aboard the Wee Sing. Behind them strode Jason's father and mother, Maxwell and Bridget George, flanked by his aunts and uncles. The close ones were his father's brothers and sisters, all married to them anyway, and behind them were those more distant aunts and uncles and cousins. All of their faces were gravely joyous. All Jason had to do was stand there. The Among the Startides We Sing thrummed beneath his feet. She was no less grave. She was no less joyous. Jason's grandparents stopped in front of Vincent and stood silent for a slow count of 10. Jason's parents flashed him a comforting smile. Those weren't the only brief flashes of comfort offered to the crew of the slain home ship. Jason's eye drank it all in. If not for his surname, this would have been a private affair, and though few would believe it, not a single word or motion would be altered for that. Perhaps more would believe or even understand than Jason credited, but he was young yet. The weight of ages was borne upon his family as they stood there, and his grandmother, Irish George, began to speak. "Captain, you have returned home." "Captain, we are home," Vincent said, with a duck of his head and a touch of his right hand to his heart. The old man's voice seemed tight with emotion to Jason. Jason stiffened his spine. "Son," Iris said, her whip-crack voice as gentle as it could go, "you have returned home." "Mother," Vincent's voice cut off, as if his throat tightened around the word. Jason realized with shock that he'd never asked Vincent about his parents. Another thing for later. It was no dishonor for joy to overcome a man, and Vincent started again. "Mother, I have returned home." Vincent once again touched his heart as he spoke. All Jason had to do was stand there. "Captain, you faced perils," Iris said gravely. "Captain, we came through perils," Vincent responded promptly as he raised open palms as if to show the perils. "Son, you faced perils." "Mother, we came through perils." The Among the Startides We Sing thrummed beneath Jason's feet. Sudden pain masked Iris's face as she said, "Did all come through these perils?" "No, one of us fell, though she fought with gallant courage," Vincent choked out. All Jason had to do was stand there. "Who did fight, though she fell?" Vincent began. "Ow!" His throat tightened around the words before he could get them out. He coughed to clear his throat. "Our home ship, the Long Way, fell in battle, though she lies behind us in victorious poise." The Long Way lay silent at Jason's back. "A new heart shall beat in her hell, A new song shall be sung under a new name, but her name shall not perish. A new house shall one day carry her name with honor, whether in peace or battle. The long way is a name of honor, Iris intoned. Honor to honor. I could not ask for more for my friend, Vincent choked out with another bow of his head. Welcome home, family. Welcome home, crew, Iris said to them all. All Jason had to do was stand there. No, he had words to say. He was Vincent's second in command. Whatever they called his rank, Vincent turned from the welcoming party to say to Jason, It was an honor to command. It was an honor to serve, Jason replied, surprised at how steady his voice was. Then, ceremony satisfied, he too turned towards the long way. He reached out to her remains where something had scorched her paint. You were a good ship, he choked out, a single tear rolling down his cheek, despite his best efforts. Farewell. Vincent wasn't surprised that the chief took this last chance to say goodbye to the sturdy little ship that had been their home for a year. He mentally kicked himself for celebrating only one birthday, but they didn't exactly catch many breaks on the final stretches of their journey. He laid a comforting hand on his shoulder as he watched Andre and Isis Magdalene ease back into her wheelchair, and the welcoming party enveloped them. The girls got her into the chair without need of help. He felt the presence of Cadet coming close and clinging to his left. The boy was wrung out by ceremony, for all that it was over. The journalists took advantage, or tried to. They pressed in, shoving microphones towards whatever warm body was handy to bark questions helpfully translated by Vincent's implant. He ignored them anyway. The George family made a wall around the crew, more or less, and Vincent caught sight of Vi and Isis Magdalene's family making their way towards their children. Not only them, some crew and maybe distant kin made their way from the mezzanine to take a chance to offer words of welcome. He was a little surprised to find Rose had made her way through the crowd and through the George family to meet him with another woman in tow. She looked a lot like her, save her fur was a little darker, and she had a long, twisting scar snaking down her face and down her neck, visible even through her thicker fur before it disappeared down her blouse. Vincent did not let his attention rest on that region. Besides, it was absorbed in the young woman smiling up at him. She looked no less gaunt in a floral-painted sundress. Maybe she would always be a bit slight, so long as she kept fit. Nice suit, she said teasingly. Thanks, Vincent replied, with perfect honesty. My niece made it for me. If anything, her grin only deepened as she said, She did a good job. This is my sister, Brianna. The journalist tried to press in. Distant George kin called Vincent cousin and said how glad they are to meet him. Vincent thought they used the same phrase that had welcomed him into the family, what Trundre called the words. For some reason, Vincent couldn't pay them much mind, and his heart was beating a merry tattoo on his ribs. It's nice to meet you, Brianna. For some reason, your sister likes spending time with me. God knows what that is. My sister was dead, Brianna said. Her voice was husky, as if she had been weeping recently, and a quick glance to Rose brought up to mind a reason why. She continued, But now she is alive again. I wanted to say thank you. Vincent fought to keep his ears from laying flat, or what was left of them anyway, and his tail from tugging, as he said, Yeah, well, call it a twist of providence. Somebody could have been sent, and I guess I was good enough. You were right, Brianna murmured to her sister. He's very fun to tease. In a louder voice with less wry humor in it, she said, If I meant to tease you, it would be. I mean it. Give credit to God if you want, but you were the man of the hour. I'll leave you to spend a little time with her, even though you're too boneheaded to figure out why. That sent Vincent's head spinning so fast that he had a hard time noticing Rose twining her right arm through his right as she asked, In too good a mood to pretend to be grumpy? Pretend, Vincent said with a wolfish grin. I was born grumpy. I'll find something to complain about if you really want to press. Just then, a journalist, a short, pale human woman with dyed blue hair, succeeded in shoving a microphone into Vi's face with the question, Were you afraid on your journey? Vi seemed taken aback, and she leaned back in her chair as she answered, Sometimes, but Jason promised that we'd all make it home, and Jason never breaks a promise. She clicked her teeth shut around the words, and her ears lay back while her still weak rudder tail twitched in a cavity in the chair like it wanted to snap the floor. More journalists pressed in, but Isis Magdalene stepped in front of her dear friend, head to toe covered in regal frost, as she declared, Jason George gave an oath and kept it, just as anybody with honor would. We are still wary from our journey. We still have words we would speak to our beloved in private. If the media magpies weren't abashed at what she said, they were at least chagrined, and refrained from trying to shove past the Georges. The one who had broken through found herself confronted by Irish George and Bridget George, or as she must have seen it, she was stuck between the Hammer, who could smash any enemy fleet, and Fix-It, who kept troopers alive even while dealing with death as crew fought the ship. Vincent deliberately did not see Jason's mother and grandmother preparing to drub somebody who had violated the privacy of children. The Star Sailors were prickly about honor, and didn't have much mercy for people who ran out their patience. Those adopted into the Nomads seemed no less prickly. "I think," Vincent said, "I would like to spend time with you in the crew quarters deck." End of chapter. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.